Joining us now is Dr. Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute to help us break down the entire Sharm el-Sheikh summit. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go ahead and start then with Donald Trump. He flew to Egypt after appearing in Israel before the Knesset. He's claiming peace in the Middle East here has finally come with several world leaders behind him. Let's take a listen to what he said.
This is the day that people across the region and around the world have been working, striving, hoping, and praying for. With the historic agreement we've just signed, those prayers of millions have finally been answered. The war in Gaza is over. Humanitarian aid is now pouring in, including hundreds of truckloads of food and medical equipment. We're also agreed that Gaza's reconstruction requires that it be demilitarized and that a new, honest civilian police force must be allowed to create a safe condition for the people in Gaza. I don't know what it is. I like the tough people better than I like the soft, easy ones. I don't know what the hell that is. It's a personality problem, I suspect. But this gentleman from a place called Turkey has one of the most powerful armies actually in the world. It's much more powerful than he even lets known. If you look at some of the recent conflicts, he was at the top of them and he was winning them, and he did win them. And he doesn't want any credits. He doesn't want anything. He just wants to be left alone. He's a tough cookie, but he's been my friend. And every time I've ever needed him, he's been there for me. He just made a big deal today, so we'll smile. The biggest effort, right?
A lot of pomp and circumstance in Sharm el-Sheikh there at the summit, Dr. Parsi. What's your general read here on some of the claims about peace in the Middle East, withstanding the hostage deal right now?
We're quite a bit away from peace, but we do have to say, though, that this is a very important and welcome necessary step. There's plenty of flaws with this deal. There's plenty of things to be worried about, but something has happened that is absolutely crucial. And that is that the United States, for the first time in several years now, actually has put pressure on Israel. That is the key to a lot of these different things. A lot of reasons as to why a lot of these regional leaders are coming and giving this exaggerated praise for an effort that has not yet even begun to yield results beyond the ceasefire and the hostage release is precisely because they want to continue to encourage the United States to do something he hasn't done for years, which is put constraints on Israel, put pressure on Israel, and stop looking at the region solely from an Israeli lens. That's why they're so excited. They know very well this may not work out. But if for the first time the US president is willing to try some of these tools, tries the instruments of pressure, they want to be as encouraging as possible. Is that enough? No, there's a lot that remains to be done. But without this pressure, we would not have a ceasefire, we would not have the release of the hostages from both sides, and we wouldn't have anything that could potentially start a real process to solve the actual core issue, which is the occupation of Palestinian land.
So let's play this out a little bit. What will it take, even just for the ceasefire to hold, and then what further would it take for there to be something approaching a resolution?
Well, for the ceasefire to hold, Trump needs to do what he didn't do between January and March. He first pressured the Israelis into a ceasefire back then, but he did not sustain that pressure. And by March, Bibi Netanyahu managed to essentially weasel his way out of that agreement and restart the genocide. This time around, clearly the demand from the Arab side and from the regional states has been that Trump needs to own this process as much as possible, make it as personal as possible, fly to the region, give all of these speeches, have all of these things in order to make it as difficult as possible for any party, particularly the Israelis, to violate the deal, because by doing so is to be in direct defiance of Trump himself. So, that pressure needs to be sustained for this to work out. Once it gets to the issue of the core problem, I think here the United States needs to really take a step back and recognize. For so long, we have said that we need to get out of this region. I think that is absolutely correct. The United States is completely overextended, has put way too many bases and troops in a region that is of increasingly little strategic value to the United States. But to do that type of burden shifting, we need something to shift it onto. We can't just shift it onto some sort of a vacuum. If the United States uses this momentum now to be able to help, not lead, but help creating an inclusive security order in the region, then I think we will have that mechanism, that infrastructure to shift the burden onto. For that to work, however, You cannot let the cancer of this continued conflict between Israel and Palestine to continue. You need to resolve the Palestinian issue. So I think we have to recognize that a creation of a Palestinian state is in the direct interest of the US itself in order to be able to get to a security architecture that is crucial for the US to be able to disengage militarily from this region.
One of the things, Dr. Parsi, they are pushing hard is the Abraham Accords. Let's take a listen to Trump encouraging all of those states to join. Let's take a listen.
Everybody's going to join the Abraham Accord. I like to say the Avraham. I love Avraham, but somehow it doesn't sound as good when I say it as it does when some of my other friends say it who are from the region.
Pronunciation and all of that notwithstanding, he is still encouraging those states to join. Why is he so wedded to that framework, and does it have any chance of success?
Well, it's interesting because it also seems as if he has changed what that framework actually means. The framework from the outset was a very erroneous one. It was actually designed to keep the United States militarily engaged in the region. It was about organizing the region, half the region against the other half, and particularly bring the Arabs and the Israelis together in order to contain Iran. This is what the US has been doing for the last 30 years, started off with dual containment back in the 1990s. This was just giving it another name and making the Arab-Israeli component much more explicit. Of course, it didn't work. It was sold as a peace plan, but in reality, it threw the Palestinians under the bus and paved the way for October 7th, because it was very clear that if you're closing the path for the Palestinians to achieve their right to a state through diplomatic means, then eventually at some point, it's going to translate into armed resistance, which is exactly what it did. So that part of it, I think, is dead in the waters. Most countries in the region are not eager to normalize relations with Israel. We saw, for instance, according to Turkish press at least, the Turks warned Trump that if he actually gets Netanyahu to come to Egypt, the Turks will turn around mid-air and go back. They're not going to attend that session together with Netanyahu. So if they won't even be on the same stage, and those are two countries that actually have relations, you can just imagine what the others are feeling like. But then there's also this other confusing thing, is that he's saying that he wants Iran to be in the Abraham Accord as well. Well, if Iran is in the Abraham Accord, then there's no longer an Abraham Accord, because the Abraham Accord was centered on the idea of isolating and containing Iran. Unless, of course, he's suggesting that he wants to have regime change in Iran, and after that bring them into the Abraham Accord. But that would also then be a clear failure, a broken promise to his base, which he said no more regime change wars.
Let's go ahead and take a listen to a little bit of what Trump did have to say about Iran.
But I think Iran will come along. They've been battered and bruised, and they need some help. They have big sanctions, as you know, tremendous sanctions. I'd love to take the sanctions off when they're ready to talk, but they can't really survive with those sanctions. Those sanctions are very tough. But at some point, they're going to say, we want the sanctions off. We're going to end up with peace. I think Iran is going to be fine. I know so many Iranian people. They're great people. They're smart, great people, engineers, lawyers. I mean, they're academics.
So what did you read into those comments?
I think we have to remind ourselves that this is pretty much exactly the same thing that he was saying back in January and February. And by June, he bombed Iran, despite ongoing and rather constructive negotiations taking place. So Tehran is extremely skeptical. They believe that there is a high risk that diplomacy with the US at this stage is just another facade for an effort to lull them into a false sense of security in order to bomb them again. I think that is understandable if you're sitting in Tehran, but I think it's also exaggerated. I don't think the Iranians had much to lose if they had actually showed up in Sharm el-Sheikh. They were apparently invited, and Trump wanted them to be there. I think from their standpoint right now, their options are not particularly good. And the risk of actually engaging is, in my view, less than not engaging. Now, I think there's a critical element that needs to be fixed in order for this to actually be a negotiation and not what Trump actually seems to be looking for, which is a conversation about Iran's terms for capitulation. The Iranians are not going to capitulate. And as long as they think that that is what Trump is looking for, they're going to be very disinclined to get engaged in any real diplomacy with him. But if Trump goes back to his original red line, which was no weapons, not the Israeli red line of no enrichment, then I think there is a deal that can be had. And the Iranians have signaled clearly that they're open to that. And in fact, they were very close to a deal on that issue. The question is, it seems like Trump thinks that Iran is in such a weak position that he has no choice but to capitulate. I think that is a misreading. Iran is in a weaker position, but it's not going to capitulate. And if you keep on insisting on it, you're more likely to get into a new round of confrontation rather than a deal and diplomacy.
One of the things I've worried about, Dr. Parsi, is that with Gaza, at least not over entirely, but quieter, Netanyahu still needs a war to justify his own political position. Well, what is the unfinished war, which he continually keeps bringing up? Iran. And so we have the snapback sanctions in place. We have the European Union and all them acting much more hawkish. It actually does seem to me as if conflict seems more likely with Iran at this point as a result now of this so-called ceasefire deal or whatever, whether it holds or not. But it makes it seem as if politically, to justify his own position, his own security doctrine, that he has to go in search of monsters to destroy.
I think, unfortunately, you may be right on this one. I don't think in the next 2 weeks.
Right. Not
I think
immediate.
in the immediate term, the risk has gone down, whereas the risk actually was pretty high. But by the end of this year, if this is not resolved, and the Israelis keep on pushing, and as you said, they need some other conflict. They also have the option of really restarting it with Lebanon. But the price for their end, of course, is to be able to defang Iran entirely. I think one of the things the Iranians committed a mistake about is that they never engaged, not just directly with the US, but they should have had just a conversation with Trump himself, whether it was the foreign minister or the president, because Trump, for him, everything is personal. Diplomacy is utterly personal. Just talking to Witkoff is just not enough. And I think there may have been a chance back then, and there may still be a chance now that if there is that type of a direct conversation, both sides will get a more realistic view of the other. From the US side, recognizing the Iranians are not going to capitulate. You push for that, you get war. From the Iranian side, recognizing you can't play this game any longer of not talking directly to the US. In fact, swallow your pride, talk directly to Trump. That's the only chance of actually getting flexibility from the American side.
And Dr. Parsi, lastly, it's important we try to think about what Netanyahu wants, because he's proven very effective at manipulating American presidents, whether it's this one or the last one or a bunch of other ones besides. Do you think that he is done with Gaza or wants to go back into, all-out kinetic warfare in Gaza as well?
I don't think he is in the slightest finished with Gaza. In fact, I don't think this is what the Israelis wanted at all. I think what happened here is a combination of two things. One, that there was this massive plunging of the standing of Israel in the America First constituency, which is Trump's core constituency. Particularly in the last couple of months, it really accelerated. And it started to become a political liability for Trump. In fact, he said to Netanyahu, according to his own conversation, as he conveyed it to Sean Hannity, he told Netanyahu, you can't continue fighting the world all the time. He's essentially telling him, you're becoming a pariah, you're becoming isolated. And this is costing me a lot because you're asking the United States to arm you, to defend you diplomatically, spend a lot of political capital to constantly bail you out of things. Enough is enough. I'm not going to walk into the midterm elections with this liability. If that is, and I think, of course, the strike against Qatar, which was this massive overreach by the Israelis, kind of was the trigger that shifted the debate inside of the White House on this issue and pushed them in the direction that we're seeing right now. So I don't think Netanyahu wanted any of this. He wanted to continue the fighting. He wanted to have the annexation, not just of Gaza. He wanted to use Gaza as a way of distract the world from what he's actually doing in the West Bank right now. So this is a major uprooting of the plan that he had. I don't think he's abandoned the plan. I think he's bidding his time to see when will Trump lose attention, shift his focus elsewhere, and when is the next opportunity for Netanyahu to restart this once again, just as he did in March.
Yeah, very, very important analysis, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.